Got some funny looks.
Okay, this is Bases 137 Part 12 with Bob Osborne talking about the Broken Biscuit Company. Take it away.
The Broken Biscuit Company, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
I know they're an institution very close to your heart, but I'm calling them the British Brainwashing Company for the purpose of this chat. And it's really an extension of what we talked about with regards to Francis Bacon and William Shakespeare, with him programming the masses into agendas that were developed during the 16th century. And the idea was that you can use, part of the series is putting the cult in culture, so you can use occultism, symbolism, to transmit ideas that you want to program the people into. So I've been looking at the BBC for quite a long time now, and it's always fascinated me, and it's only really I started delving into a lot of the channels and decoding a lot of the channels and the images and the symbols they were using, that I realised it was really an extension of what they were doing with the Shakespeare project, which was on a slightly higher cultural level. But the programmes like EastEnders, Coronation Street, all the other ones that have been going on for the last 20, 30 years are really aimed at like getting the people at the bottom of the pyramid into the agenda that they want to move them into. So I looked at the logos, and this was a very early logo. I mean, I grew up post-war, so as a child in the 50s. At the time, I think the Festival of Britain was very important. That was in 1951, and they were bringing a lot of cultural influences into this country. And this logo was one of the early ones. I think this was 51, and it's called the Bat's Wings logo, for obvious reasons. So looking at the occultism that was prevalent in Elizabethan times, with John Dee, who was very much part of establishing creating the British Empire and programming the British Empire and concepts of patriotism and Englishness into people, via Francis Bacon and William Shakespeare. So it's very interesting that the two books on Desert Island Discs, which is another one of the BBC, very important programs in terms of shown every Sunday morning, and the two books that are on the desert island that people get stranded on are the complete works of Shakespeare and the Bible, which presumably is the King James Bible, written by James I. In fact, both those books were actually written by part of the Francis Bacon agenda. So they created this sense of what it is to be English, and those two books were like ways of using language to process a lot of cultural norms into people, and that's very relevant. So this logo, again, we're moving out the post-war into austerity, and just the symbolism here is quite apparent. You've got the all-seeing eye in the middle, which is obviously an Illuminati symbol, the all-seeing eye being in the centre there, and then you've got the spinning globe. And I think I did see some footage of this original logo, and actually the centre spins round, and it's quite mesmeric. And you've got the bat's wings, and also bat symbolism is that can be interpreted. It can mean death, but it also means the transformation of thought into new thought patterns and new belief systems. So it's a good and a bad thing. But only last week on my way up through Somerset, I stayed with a friend, a Polish sculptor, and we were having dinner in the kitchen, and I started a rant about the BBC, and then this bat appeared in the room, and the bat was flying around for a while, and eventually we got rid of it. But again, these things happen a lot, and for me, they're not bat's wings. They also represent phoenix. So the concept of the phoenix is very important, because it's about rising from the ashes. So this obviously goes back to Egyptian mythology, and all through a lot of BBC programming, you do get this symbolism that gets repeated. So BBC, again, you got 3 letters, and 3 is also a very important occult number. So a lot of the agencies or the institutions that were part of the British fabric, like the BBC, the NHS, MI5, MI6, Then going further afield, you got CIA, KGB, Ku Klux Klan, which is KKK. K is 11, so 3 11s is 33. So a lot of these numbers relate to numerology and gematria that really was starting to get processed through people like Francis Bacon with his ciphers. And again, 3 is an inversion of the Holy Trinity number. So what is apparently just a logo. Clearly, a lot of thought has gone into this, and I think this is one of the early ones that went through various transformations. And the whole concept of the phoenix is very important in terms of the Great Reset and the New World Order, and the occult belief systems that mean you've got to break things down in order to create new things. And at this same time, Picasso was we talked about last time, was breaking down traditional art movements into cubism. And one of Picasso's great quotes was that every act of creation involves an act of destruction. So the concept that things are constantly renewing was being processed into people's, into people's psyches. So I looked at other fonts, and this is actually called Test Card. I think it's Test Card J. There was a whole series of these. They're really interesting because I think when I started first watching TV in the 60s, when the idea was to get a TV in everyone's home, because I think, as I said before, my family couldn't read or write, so we didn't have any books. But I think it was important for the post-war generation who were being manoeuvred into what is called the New Age or the New World Order. They got these TVs in everyone's homes, and it was quite a thing that the idea was that you can get the working classes, you can entertain them, you can stop them going to the pub. But what they didn't know, or what we didn't know, was that we're also being programmed on a very high level. So at the same time, as a child, we had the Saturday morning pictures. I used to go to the flicks, and of course, then at this time also was a thing called mass observation, which turns out to be quite a sinister organisation. And you had a lot of Fabians and a lot of Cambridge graduates who were employed to go around the north of England and other areas where poor working class people were congregating, observe their habits, with kind of quite minute detail. And it was a project that I got interested in. In fact, one of the people I knew who was involved with it was an artist called Julian Trevelyan, who I worked with, I knew, played chess with him at the end of his life. And he was the brother of, I think it was John Trevelyan, who was the film censor. So they were very much part of this Fabian world. And this agenda involved them going literally and spying on the working classes and the masses, observing their thought patterns. And it relates a bit to what was going on in Germany with, the Stasi. But of course the English were past masters at this, and it goes back again to the mass observation. It was a way about how we can manipulate the people into moving them into the agendas that we want them to go into. So the other things about at that time, there were people at the cinema when I was going as a kid to Saturday morning pictures. It was always full of screaming kids, and they would make notes and observe what made them frightened, what made them happy, what made them laugh, what made them fearful. So there was a lot of westerns, there was a lot of Pathé News, British propaganda coming out of the post-war empire. And the idea that there's these kind of weirdos sitting in the audience making notes, in retrospect, it kind of makes a bit more sense when you think about various things that have happened with the BBC. So again, just looking at this test card, that girl, I decided to check her out. Her name's Carol Hersey, and it was her father that created this test card. And this used to be on, I remember it used to be on to bring the frequencies up in order for the picture to appear. So it was like a build-up process. But this would be on the screen for quite a long time. And clearly there's elements of hypnosis in this. And I believe that, part of that mesmerism comes through the occult symbolism in there that you can kind of pick up. So she there is playing noughts and crosses. Noughts and crosses again was a popular game, but it goes back to the Egyptian game where they played it on tablets of stone, and you could look into X's and zeros. Again, we've got the all-seeing eye in the middle. That's dominant. That's also the globe. So the BBC was really at the forefront of bringing in what's called the globalist worldview, and it was very much part of British military intelligence to to get information out there that isn't necessarily the information that is true, but it's information that latterly Reuters and the Secret Services, wanted to impart into people. That's actually Bubbles the clown, and apparently that was changed. The smock was blue, and then it was changed to green, and because it didn't fit in with the frequency of the colours around there. So I dare say a scientist could explain how these colours, the frequency of these colours affects your consciousness. But more obvious things are the pyramid symbolism. In the middle there, you've got the V pyramid, which is the classic pyramid sign, but it's kind of hidden in plain sight. And also the fact that there's pyramids and squares relates to the Freemasonry squares and compasses. So the pyramid also relates to sex magic, because you imagine the compasses and it's the legs, and again you've got lots of squares. Now the clown, at this time when I was growing up as a kid, there was a lot of stuff about with clowns, and it's proven in hindsight to be quite a scary image, and I think quite sinister. And the fact that this young girl is involved, it very much relates to the loss of innocence. And at that time, I started looking at other things. Like one of the things I remember was Sooty and Sweep. Sooty again was a kind of bear, and we're going to talk a little bit about teddy bears in this chat. But in this program, it was all set in a country cottage, so it was quintessentially post-war English, but there's always these sinister undertones to do with children and the loss of innocence. And I think in one of the characters in Sooty and Sweep was a snake that was called Ramsbottom. Now, again, if you start looking at the language, like bawdy language that was used in Shakespeare, at this time in the 50s, I remember listening to a lot of programs like Round the Horn and things like that, and it was all very camp, and there was a lot of hidden jokes and hidden meanings. So if you look at a snake called Ramsbottom, snake, you've got the serpent. Ramsbottom equates to a ram, to goat, to Baphomet, and of course bottom suggests that there's a snake and a ram's bottom. So when you kind of start looking into this and thinking these thoughts, then you realise that it's not an isolated incident. You can go through all these programs that involved middle-aged men with bears or glove puppets, and at this time the concept of the puppet is also very important, because there was there was various projects that as a kid that I didn't know about at the time, obviously, but were going on post-war with project, I think, Puppet Master, and there was Oak Tree when they were like doing experiments on children, getting them out of school, taking them to I used to get taken to Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, and you end up in some country house, and God knows what was going on. So the idea of the puppet, and again, putting the strings on the puppet as well is very relevant. And so there's a whole load of these, and they're all quite similar, but the fact they changed every year, and I think they got more sophisticated in terms of how they could actually mesmerise the public. Later, when I realised that how much this had affected mine and also lots of other people's childhoods, growing up in those 50s times, there was always a darkness about the 50s, partly the fact that I was growing up in a very weird environment in London with my gypsy family, and we were rag and bone men, and but there was always a sense that when you go to the Boy Scouts, of course, Baden Powell, I think everyone knows about him, and at the time I always felt very uneasy about it. So we would be sent out as kids to do bob a job, so you go and work for people, and then you hand the money back to the scoutmaster. So basically it's one big Ponzi scheme, just like of course the tax system and everything else is with a banking system, which is a more sophisticated version of that. But the sense of sending children out to work in strangers' houses, and the whole Boy Scout thing. I mean, one of my fondest childhood memories is burning down the park keeper's hut after he stopped us playing football. But then I realised when I was working as an artist and also as a poet and a writer, a lot of my material was very dark, and this is something I did just a few years ago. I was working with these old postcards, and at the time, not only was there the teddy bear programs, but there was also, I got very interested and still am fascinated by ventriloquism. I was I used to watch these absolutely in awe, and the whole thing taps again into the occult, because it's about summoning or taking an identity or summoning an entity out of this inanimate object, which is these kind of beautiful and really eerie little creatures that they keep in their boxes. So I used to follow all the ventriloquists, and I used to go to the fairground, and obviously Punch and Judy as well. I had a friend who was a Punch and Judy man at that time. Again, it's about getting an audience of children and kind of manipulating their emotions to a certain extent. But when I started working on this, I mean, I have also worked in using sex magic in my art, and I've channeled Pan as well for poetry. And this is before I started researching what I've been researching for the last 4 or 5 years. Was really the sense that there's satanic entities that are used for entertainment. So, this is just one of those characters at the time, in the 40s or 50s, and I looked at all the music hall people, and there's definitely satanic overtones to it in a lot of it. Now, this is something that people probably know about. This is on Broadcasting House. I think it's in Portman Square, and this statue is really kind of the epitome of what we're talking about when we're talking about occult symbolism. And this is actually Prospero and Ariel. And this is quite contentious and has been a cause of a lot of concern over the years, in the sense that the artist is called Eric Gill, who is a very good stonemason and also carver. But the main scandal about Eric Gill was that he raped both his daughters. He raped his dog, and at the time, he was very much part of a world of artists that were kind of protected, but were involved in a lot of tapping into the occult. So the fact that the BBC own probably the biggest collectors of his work, and they own a lot of his statues, which have become very, people don't want them shown. They don't want them emblemised, but they have great value. So I looked at the store of work that they've got by Eric Gill, and they seem to be a big collector of his work. And this one in particular is very relevant because Prospero, the man there, relates to Francis Bacon's The Tempest. So it's a natural progression from the occult work and the occult symbolism that Francis Bacon decoded into Shakespeare's work through ciphers. So Prospero was the figure in The Tempest, which is again is very relevant to what's going on now with tsunamis and weather control. So Prospero was also based on John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's magician, and the concept was that they could raise, talk to demons, and the whole thing about Enochian magic that Dee and his scribe Edward Kelly practiced was about summoning demons, summoning angels, drawing in occult information in order to change world events. So Prospero was involved with Caliban, who was the devil, and Ariel is this boy from The Tempest, and he's I think 7-9 years old, something like that. But anyway, it's the concept that it's an androgynous boy, and again, we can see what's going on really. And what interested me recently, and I actually had a discussion last night with somebody about Francis Bacon's work and symbolism, and I was thinking about, I was going to do something about the BBC. And when you look at the BBC and what we've got programs, and we've got channels. So, again, you've got the two buzzwords there, programming and channeling. And channeling, of course, is bringing in entities from other sources. And Ariel was this archetype of an innocent child. And as kids, when we got our first TVs, they never seemed to work. So I would have to stand in the corner of a room with an Ariel and then not move. But the fact that you're channeling the programs through an Ariel, again, it's the beauty of language, and when you can decode this language. And obviously Ariel was the name of this boy that was used by Prospero to summon And also the whole thing about the Illuminati or the Cabal, or the fact that, with the Hollywood and the adrenochrome stuff, is that you have to get into altered states in order to access demons, access the hidden knowledge. So the fact that that's really the totem on the front of Broadcasting House, and it has caused a lot of controversy over the years, but they seem completely blithely to ignore people's concerns. In fact, I think a couple of years ago, when the demonstrations about the jab were taking place, somebody scaled Broadcasting House, which I think they do quite regularly, and threw red paint over it. But I suspect, like a lot of these things, it was an inside job, like the Guy Fawkes, to make people think, because people were marching on. I remember at the time I was on this demonstration during the COVID hoax, and people said, "Let's march on BBC." So immediately the groundswell of opinion was that the BBC are clearly one of the people that are manifesting this evil. So there was a march on the BBC, but you never know how far this is orchestrated as controlled opposition. So people felt as though they were cheering the guy who put red paint up there, but again, I think it might have been facilitated, a bit like the Guy Fawkes plot. But again, it was cleaned up and it's still there. So they also have lots of other symbols and sculptures, and including some of Helios, the sun god. I grew up actually next to the old BBC Centre in Wood Lane, because I was living at White City at the time. So it was always a very iconic place, and the statues were there, and clearly they're there for occult and symbolic reasons. Moving on a little bit, but just looking at EastEnders is fascinating, really, because when I'm talking about the likes of Macbeth and Hamlet, which are kind of highbrow cultural programming, also they now, when we moved into a more democratic, so-called egalitarian age with the war, they really wanted to start programming the masses, and they were already used as cannon fodder and feudal slaves. But I think now they were processing them, and a lot of this came out of the Tavistock Institute and the likes of Huxley, who wanted to control the working class, and also obviously cull them and depopulate them as well when the time was right. So just looking at this opening shot, and I remember EastEnders very well, because at the time the first scene from EastEnders, if I remember rightly, was a guy called Dirty Den. Again, the names are great, and Dirty Den was played by an actor called Leslie Grantham. And he had a bit of history in the sense that when he was in the war doing his national service, he shot and killed a man in Germany, and so he was banged up for that. But I think then suddenly he came out and he's become an actor, and he was, of course, the first actor to appear in EastEnders. And his first line was, he walked into this disgusting room, and his first line was, "It stinks in here, done it," which was a very much part of that cultural milieu at the time, in the sense that it's like kitchen sink drama, and it's about dark subjects. All the plays are about dark subjects. It taps into what's his name, Harold Pinter. So we're looking at the low life. And funny enough, a few years later, I was on a panel with Leslie Grantham, because I was a wine taster after a while, and again I was randomly meeting a lot of characters in EastEnders. This has happened all through my life, because I've also had my own foray into reality TV, so I was very interested in reality TV. So the fact that this opening scene, you're immediately in a dark satanic place, and it's very similar in my mind to the opening scene of Macbeth, when the witches come in, and immediately the atmosphere is very dark. So they're programming people into a dark environment. So the fear spreading, but also it's an entertaining kind of fear, because you're programming people into being addicted to what comes next. So a lot of I did follow it for quite some time, and a lot of the big programs were done on Christmas and New Year's Eve. So they were like tumultuous. Lots of viewers were watching this. There was always dark things going on, so it was almost like a ritual. There was always people dying tragically, or having breakdowns, or being murdered. So the witchcraft was apparent. And here we got, for example, that's the serpent going through the River Thames. So again, it's a very obvious Illuminati or Gnostic symbol, and the thing about the Thames is that it was formerly, in Roman times, it's Mother Thames, so it identifies with Isis. Isis, the deity, that is also very important. So the fact that it's already got connections to Isis, and at the time when the Romans built it, it was built from wood. So there was many occasions when it was being falling down, and then it was rebuilt with brick, and then stone, and then latterly with steel. So during these incarnations of London Bridge, there's rumours at the time that each time it was obviously built by Freemasons, because the City of London is the Freemasonic centre of the world, and also the banking system. So this part of London, when it was rebuilt, each rebuilding the rebuilding concept again ties in with Phoenix. So you're building something out of the ashes, and of course the Masons are the master builders, going back to ancient mystery schools. So the fact that it's constantly being rebuilt in a Masonic way, to where we are now, and there was rumours at the time, or maybe folk tales, that every time it was built, or children's bodies would be thrown into the Thames as a sacrifice to Isis. So Isis sacrifice, again, there's people that believe that for example, Diana, it represents Isis, and you need sacrifice to these gods. So even when I was going on boats, I used to take boats up and down the back of the Thames when I was researching my family and stuff like that, with the public hangings that used to take place on Wapping Pier. And even 20 years ago, when I was checking it out, there was still the gallows there. So again, criminals, or people who, not even criminals, probably would be hung and disposed of, and they would just drop from the gallows into the Thames. So clearly the Thames is a very occult, with a lot of meaning, and it really runs through the centre of London, which is really modern day Rome, in the sense that it's an extension of the Holy Roman Empire. So via the Venetians and via the Knights Templars and the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. So the Thames is very symbolic, and the fact that you've got the serpent running through the Thames, again, this is, the serpent is like hidden knowledge, which can only be accessed by people who can either do it through occult means, or through channeling, or through their DNA. So even songs like London Bridge is Falling Down, which became one of those mantras that children would learn, connects to the My Fair Lady symbolism. And also London Bridge is Falling Down is the code word that the MI5 and other institutions, including probably the BBC, would use for the Queen's death, Queen Elizabeth II, that is. So who bears an uncanny resemblance in many ways to Queen Elizabeth I, in the sense that that there's mystery children not quite sure about their parentage and things like this, but this has been run through royal history. So the song London Bridge is Falling Down is very interesting, and this is how these myths get preserved through song, through lyrics. All the rock lyrics, all can be decoded. All the folk songs, all the children's songs can be decoded. And I think also the idea, like little things like London Bridge was sold supposedly to the Americans, and they've got a London Bridge in Arizona, and that's true because they have got one in Arizona. But that again, you can look at that as a programmed ritual, or a piece of program, in order to sense that ultimately, pretty soon, probably the American economy is going to crash. And the America is really a manifestation of Babylon, in the sense that the revelations, belief systems that got moved into Freemasonry and Albert Pike and that whole program in the future, predictive programming is very relevant. So the fact that there's a significance why some American millionaire was duped into buying a replica of London Bridge, and it very much resonates with the weird relationship between the Crown, Imperial Britain, and its child America, with Pax Americana. So all that's you can go into many different areas of that. So another even more interesting program in my eyes. As I said, we had TVs we had access to TV. They were given to the poor people as well. We would get them. They never worked. But the first TV program I ever saw when I was aged 7 in 1960 was Coronation Street. I remember this was a big thing. You know, this was about the working class in Manchester, and I remember sitting down with my father and his brothers and watching this program. And it kind of must have made an impact, because it's a bit like people who first go to the Globe Theatre to see Macbeth or Hamlet. So you know, it's a kind of programmed event, and it's almost a ritual. And then the fact that it was shown, I think, twice a week at the same time, and so people were in the Coronation Street program, just as other people were in the EastEnders program. Although this was ITV and EastEnders was BBC, the fact is, I still think it's all under one umbrella of the media. So, you know, even when I did work on Channel 4 in a reality program, which I was asked to go into, which was 4 in a Bed, which was quite interesting. So that was aired in May 2014. So as far as I'm concerned, all these channels are pretty much under the same umbrella as the BBC and Reuters. So this became a thing, and one of the early people to appear in this program, who I, even as a young child, I got fixated on her, and this is a woman called Elsie Tanner. Now, I actually only recently researched her because she's been coming up as weird coincidences through my life in other areas of research. And I think James Callaghan, the Prime Minister, stood up in Parliament and said this was the sexiest woman on TV. And he's not wrong, because she was very much the archetype of the flame-haired, troubled woman. And there's elements where it links into Aleister Crowley, which I'll go into in a minute. But she actually lived at 11 Coronation Street. As we said before, 11 is an Illuminati occult number. So even the address that she lived in, and this photograph is actually at Hilda Ogden's. I hope people know what I'm talking about when I mention these names. It's probably not even Miles's generation, but Hilda Ogden lived at 13. So again, when you start decoding these things, the symbolism is very apparent. And her background was really interesting. In the 1950s, again, with a lot of these people, there's confusion about her birth line and her parentage, because it turns out that her Irish father was a bigamist. So there's a lot of uncertainty about whether she was put into a family. So she was obviously identified as a child, a talented child actor, and she went to the stage school that a lot of people went to, a lot of aspiring young women at that time, where they were learning a kind of Marxist style of acting. But during the 50s, she appeared in The L-Shaped Room, which was a kind of gritty film, and she played a prostitute in that. And then she also appeared in Blood of the Vampires and Jack the Ripper. So she's appearing in these kind of occult horror films. Again, they're very impactful. And ironically, at the time when I was 7, I was with my father, and he was actually living with a prostitute called Rose, an Irish prostitute. So I always think that even at my young age, I was being presented with an archetype of sexuality. I'm not complaining, by the way, that then more or less informed a lot of choices I made later in life. So, you know, I was always kind of in a way looking for Elsie Tanner, or that archetype, the flame-haired archetype. And that is the archetype that Aleister Crowley used with regards to the Scarlet Woman. So it's the red hair. It's the he would use muses. So Jack Parsons' muse was a Scarlet Woman, and again they were always, you know, Crowley in 1904 had Rose Kelly, who was a troubled Irish descendant, who was also, you know, this concept that you have to access. You have to use muses or scryers to access occult information. So one of the ways to channel it was through through the depiction of sexuality and actually sex magic itself. So on further investigation into Elsie Tanner, I mean, this is only two days ago I looked into her, because I was always fascinated by her. and her real name was Pilkington, but she changed her name from Pat Pilkington to Pat Phoenix, and I thought, this is just another incredible coincidence. So, changing her name to Phoenix. Also, she became, later in her life, tragically she died from alcoholism, but she married Tony Booth. Now, Tony Booth was the father of Cherry Booth, who was obviously Tony Blair's wife. So Pat Phoenix, or Pat Pilkington, changed her name to Pat Phoenix, became the stepmother-in-law of Tony Blair. Just another incredible coincidence. I just looked back at a few programs. I didn't want to go back all over again, but the Three Ducks again, I haven't been able to totally decode that, but it's obviously very significant because it kept appearing all the time. And I did get an idea that one of them might represent the Queen's death, because there's two ducks there. But there was also a singer called Morrissey, who was, again, very dark, very depressing lyrics, and he was fixated on Elsie Tanner as well. And he did a single in which he had a black and white photo of Elsie Tanner, or Pat Phoenix, on the cover of this single, and the single was called Shakespeare's Sister. So again, we've got connections to Shakespeare. I dare say if I went through her bloodline, I could find that there's interesting things that might connect her in another way to Shakespeare and Francis Bacon. But as if that's not enough, when I was investigating the coven in Newlyn that Aleister Crowley was running, from a house in which I over the past 5 years have been a regular visitor to, and I've incidentally met the people the descendants of Crowley's mistress, Pat Doherty, who was also a scryer. She was a psychic, and she was doing decoding at Cairo during the war. So she was enrolled into MI5, and she had Crowley's child, Moonchild, and that child Ataturk. I don't know Ataturk, but I've got mutual friends who did know him, and next to this house, which was a pre-Raphaelite house, which was owned by someone high up in the Golden Dawn. So all this Fabianism, occultism, Gnosticism, it runs through all these families and all these cultural industries. There was an estate called the Pink Estate, and Ataturk had a scheme to make money out of these. So he decided to build houses, and he, including a friend of mine who became a labourer on that, and he built houses, and he had a show house, and he had a grand opening, and two people attended this grand opening. One was Bob Monkhouse, who, again, high-level Freemason, and the other one was Pat Phoenix. I mean, what are the chances of that? So clearly, they both bought houses on this estate. So Crowley also had a sex magic ritual called or black magic mass called the Phoenix Mass, and the Phoenix Mass involved drinking olive oil, blood, and semen. So again, we've got an actress who's been probably programmed or used as a psychological honey trap, deeply involved in the occult, changing her name to Phoenix. The links are just phenomenal, and I dare say if I went further I could find even more, but I'm not going to spend a long time watching old copies of Coronation Street, although I did see one where there was a tram crash in 2010. This is just coming back to me randomly, but this is watched by 20 million people, so clearly you're talking big numbers here. And on this tram crash, if you focus in on a still, there's a piece of wood that was in the road, and the piece of wood had the Baphomet goat's head on it, on the wood. So again, the people that are writing Coronation Street, writing EastEnders, is a bit like Francis Bacon's writing Shakespeare. They're not just some random people who are coming up a story about working class life in the Rover's Return or in Walford Square. Again, Walford Square, you're looking at Freemasonry symbolism. It goes much deeper than that, and so clearly either they're programming people with occult symbolism somehow, which does seep into your brain, just like in the 50s, all the teddy bear stuff, which we can go on to now. But just another thing with there's Pat again later on, all through Coronation Street, there's a constant flood of celebrities and politicians making random guest appearances. Now, I've seen the list. This is just a random one of Dustin Hoffman, but I've seen the list including, just about everyone at the time. All politicians would make random appearances, including the cretin Prince Charles. He even made a guest appearance, and I think Charles and Camilla also made a recent embarrassing appearance in EastEnders. So that suggests to me that this is all about. This is just, as Carlin said, George Carlin, the American comedian. This is one big club, and they're all kind of partaking in whatever rituals they do. Another random person that appeared apparently as a child actor was a group called the Monkees, and now I've also decoded Laurel Canyon and bands that were controlled by the CIA, which is just about every rock band going, heavy metal, Stones, Beatles, all of them. And the Monkees were another fabricated band, a bit where they kind of groomed these youths, very relevant to what's going on even this week with P. Diddy and Liam Payne. The kids fell out of windows, and it's a random killing is to throw them out a window, and that involves Simon Cowell. Even to this day, there's a whole thing about putting people into positions of power within the music business or the entertainment business. And one of the early people, apparently as a child actor, was Mickey Jones, who was one of those innocent little children in the Monkees, which is kind of their version of the Beatles. So again, at the time, you think, why would one of the Monkees be a child actor in Coronation Street? Or because they were going to these stage schools where they were indoctrinating a lot of people. And at that time, the stage schools were where I was living as a child. So I used to get on the bus with Jenny Agutter, who went on to become an actress, and a lot of the people, the females in EastEnders, I then randomly would meet in pubs and things like that, including Janine Butcher and Barry Evans. I don't know if people know these names, but they were constantly coming into my life, and I just found it really weird. And the whole thing about grooming child stars is that then they're very much in the program, and once they're in it, they have to follow the script that they're given. And I just recognised this going on all the time. So also the sense of being in the program, it's quite a chilling word, because as I said, I was invited or requested, coerced into appearing in a reality TV show called Four in a Bed, which I did for 2 weeks 10 years ago. It's almost as if so I've been in the program and I've been out of the program, but when you're in the program and you're mic'd up 24 hours a day for 2 weeks, then they offer you therapy when you come out of reality TV in case you're finding it shock. So it's almost as if you don't know what the real world is. You're this grey area between the real and the fictional world, and I think a lot of these soap operas do serve this purpose into blowing. People have not a very good sense of what's real and what's not. So they look upon these people as members of their family, and they're attached to them, and they do a ritual every twice a week, or now then it became 4 or 5 times a week with EastEnders of watching it. So and again, going back to occult symbolism, well, this of course is a very dark story that's been well documented. That's Sir Jimmy Savile there, smoking his cigar. On the left you've got Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. I've kind of talked a little bit before about how Savile was a follower of Aleister Crowley's Thelemic religion, and of course he was very high up, and I suspect that he was a Zionist. He clearly had, the BBC weren't going out their ways to get rid of him, let's put it that way. So he had a lot of influence in high places, and I dare say one of those high places was the 6-letter Secret Service agency with the 2 middle letters being SS. So he was clearly a Zionist. Sutcliffe was, that's a whole story about them visiting him in jail. Lord Longford, all these old gentlemen from parts of the establishment seem to be wanting their release, visiting prisoners all the time, and it links in a bit to the criminal underworld at the time with the craze and everything. It was all webbed up with MI5. But here we go, Frank Bruno, boxer. Now, I've always been absolutely fascinated by sports, and on another occasion, I'd like to do something on how sport is rigged up and used as, again, for brainwashing programs. Now, I did do a bit of a dive on this because Frank Bruno and Jimmy Savile used to come down to Penzance quite a lot, and I interviewed a guy who was under the influence of Crowley. A lot of people do get under the influence once they start dabbling in black magic rituals, and they were coming down quite regularly, and then visiting a Tory MP at the time called John Knott, who was involved with the Falklands, but that's not a story I'm not going to go into. But here we go. Look at the suit. So you've got the blue and the red, which are Freemason colours. The blue and the red are the contrasting colours that, for example, in boxing you have the blue corner, the red corner, and he's got the pyramid again in his pocket, his chest pocket. Now, as a kid, I used to see people wearing black suits, especially crooks, with that handkerchief. I always thought it was a bit weird. Why would you put a handkerchief like that? And that's clearly a Masonic symbol. So it's pyramid. It's pyramid. The capstone. So again, there's a cult goings on there, and whether that they were grooming. Clearly, sport is a very much a big part of what went on, and even remembering that second channel with the test card J, I think it was, the square is the shape of a football pitch, and the circle in the middle is the circle in the middle of a football pitch. So there's four corners as well. So again, you're looking at squares and rectangles and pyramids, which is all like the sacred geometry that a lot of people decode far better than I do. So again, here we are, Jimmy Savile. That's Sir Bobby Charlton, and great footballer. But again, what's really disturbing about this is that children in need. There was a lot of money raising by these entities, supposedly for children. But look at the image of the teddy bear, and again, you've got the one-eyed symbolism. The Illuminati. Eye of Horus. You've got the triangle down in the bottom left, and a lot of these programs, there was a lot of preying on the fact that there was a lot of distressed children around. But again, I find the whole thing darkly satanic, and these celebrities and these footballers were coerced into going and performing and raising money. I don't know whether the money actually got back to the children or not, but again, you've got the triangle there, the pyramid within the pyramid, and you've got the BB and then probably the C underneath. So at the time, teddy bears also have been very much associated with with the loss of innocence of children, and all through art and culture there's quite you see someone with a teddy bear and that's a signal. So even in my own personal, my mother and her sister were evacuated to Leicester during the war, Second World War, and of course there's a lot of images of these children just carrying their teddy bears, and which again, they're vulnerable, and they're almost forming. It's almost a sick relationship with their teddy bear, and there's the number of teddy bears that they seem to have one eye was quite remarkable, and then you get like Winnie the Pooh, Paddington Bear, again, like Desert Island Discs, it becomes an icon of Englishness, but it's also got this dark influences about this Paddington Bear that gets lost at the station, and they're kind of lost, and they're disappeared. They're missing. They don't know where they are. So very disturbing images of teddy bears, and again in drama, like a drama like Brideshead Revisited, for example, which is a very fine book by Evelyn Waugh, and a really good TV program. One of the main characters is Sebastian Flight, who's an aristocratic, almost child man, and his main partner, or he never goes anywhere when he went to Oxford without his little teddy bear. So the fact that when you see grown men with teddy bears, it's a very disturbing image, and even modern day artists like Grayson Perry, who I've done a lot of looking into to the symbolism in his work. You know, he's got a teddy bear, and he's a transdresser, transvestite, promoting the transgenderism in art, and he's always with his teddy bear, and again it's very dark symbolism, and it's showing you that they're in the club, whether they're forced to represent themselves in these ways by their the powers that be, probably. Again, you could just find hundreds and hundreds of these. Gary Glitter, at the time, again you got the teddy bear, the one-eyed symbolism, and again they're constantly raising money for children. So you know, Jim will fix it. You know, children are going into his studio, and Gary Glitter's one of his probably most famous song before he disappeared to Thailand, on the run. I think his most famous iconic song was "Do You Want to Be in My Gang? My gang, my gang." So this is another mantra, these lines that people were singing, and you could go to discos and pubs, and when people were like pissed up, for some reason they'd start singing "Do you want to be in my gang?" Just like they were singing YMCA and things like this. So, you know, again, these lines seep into people's consciousness, so that they're like mantras, they're like lines from Shakespeare that are memorable, like "to be or not to be," but it's just attacking a different, it's attacking a much less educated audience, and it's doing it in a very you know, surreptitious way, but that's how the media works. So again, the whole football thing is very close to my heart, you know, and both my granddads were boxers. I played football and cricket, so I've spent a long time decoding all these sports and how they're used for Freemasonry rituals. And here we got the ex-England manager, thankfully, you know, also done work on how the 1966 World Cup was a ritual, and how it was, you know, England had to win it and stuff like that. But this is ironically, Miles, this is a guy called Gareth Southgate, and of course your local boozer around the corner is the Southgate Inn. But he's not at the Southgate Inn, he's at the Freemasons' Arms. So the Freemasons' Arms, football was created by a group of Masons, the FA, the Football Association. It's a deeply Masonic organisation, and all the managers are Masons, and Southgate's no exception. I've got the list of all the lodges that they belong to, including, you know, footballers like Sir Stanley Matthews and all those. They all belong to certain lodges, and most big football grounds have lodges within them, but I can talk about that on another time when I can go into detail. But here he is also doing the Freemason hand sign, so, you know, pointing, and then again he's obviously sponsored by Carlsberg, but he's standing in front of the Freemasons' Arms. He's almost doing the wide eyes as well, and the Freemason sign. So it's evident that again, you know, he's letting everyone know that he's a Freemason and he's doing his job. Okay, I mean, there's so many programs that you can look at, but I'm just like focusing on 2 or 3 now, to get the gist of how these symbols are used. So here we got the Apprentice with Sir Alan Sugar, or Lord Amstrad, you know, and again you've got pretty obvious symbolism. You've got the London Eye, you know, the all-seeing eye, and you've also got the shard, so, you know, the monolith, the citadel that appears everywhere, you know, including Washington and London and Venice, and again the citadel is connected to, or the shard is connected to, you know, the worship of the penis as well. So that figures quite a lot in the mystery schools, and you know, when you know what to get up to, it's not surprising. Because there we got the River Thames, Mother Thames, you know, Isis. And I've always watched The Apprentice because, you know, growing up in markets, a bit like, you know, Sugar grew up, his first money making venture was, I think, selling animal fat, you know, so he's the proverbial boy from the streets, you know, clearly very Jewish, who makes it in the world, becomes, you know, a multi-millionaire, you know, early promoter of computers. I'm not sure how he suddenly got to be Mr. Amstrad, because a guy from his background, I'm not sure where he learnt his computer skills, but anyway, he's very much associated with the early computers, and of course computers are like TV. It's like the mythical Pandora's box, which is a box that has technology in it, and so the fact that a computer, again, when you talk about channels, programs, and computers have programs called daemons, and also they have to be accessed through software called wizard. So you've got wizard accessing daemons from the ether, and which is an extension of the 1950s, 60s TVs where you were channeling programs to aerials. So again, these words are very significant. And the thing about The Apprentice, if you watch it, it's pretty obvious that it always starts with this group of no-hopers who it's almost like a humiliation ritual as well. So they get eliminated, and it's like an initiation ceremony, because obviously Sugar is Freemason, as are all the other people in his program, Karen Brady and the other guys. So it's like they're initiating people who want to come join their club, and what they do is they have to go through these rites of passage or challenges, in which most of them are absolutely useless, but there's always one or two that will emerge to become accepted into the club. So they're actually put through exercises to prove their worth to the Grand Mason. So they are the sorcerer's apprentices, if you like, and he is the sorcerer in the sense that he can obviously access information and access power, just like John Dee would access information through demons and Enochian magic. But moving on to people like Sugar, they're accessing it through technology. So most of the scenes they're woken up at 5 or 6 in the morning, which again is a Masonic ritual. So the sun always seems to be there, whatever the weather, in the background outside their hotel room. They're living in these dorms. And so there's Ra sun worship as well, which is a Masonic thing. So then they're put through their various tasks until they're eliminated or culled, until the surviving one that proves his worth. And often the surviving ones are ones that might have some project that uncannily is an agenda that the Deep State or the Cabal or the Freemasons or whatever you call it or BBC are keen to promote, like smart meters or wind tunnels, things like that. So again, you've got this whole thing about them proving their worth and them being accepted, and the rest are discarded. And again, the final scene or the denouement on each of these rituals is that the person that is about to be kicked out, Lord Sugar points his finger like that and says, "You're fired," and then that's the end of the scene. It's also fascinating that The Apprentice was based on the American version, which obviously starred Donald Trump, a consummate actor, and so it was him really that started this whole Apprentice thing. And of course, Donald Trump is high-level Scottish rights. But another offshoot of The Apprentice is a program called Dragon's Den, which I also used to watch. And Dragon's Den, again, you've got the symbolism, you've got the dragon, the serpent, you've got the den, and obviously these businessmen are all high-level Freemasons, and it's another similar thing where a budding entrepreneur, a member of the public, most of whom are innocent and are actually suffer quite a lot of ritual humiliation in this program, they have to present their case, and if they can convince these sorcerers or these entrepreneurs, these controllers, these high-level Freemasons, that they are good enough or to justify them giving them money, then they are accepted into the club. So again, they have to prove themselves to be accepted or initiated into the Dragon's Den. So there we are.